The Lord be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to John. 6 days before the Passover, Jesus came to Bethany, where Lazarus was, whom Jesus had raised from the dead. They gave a dinner for him there, and Martha served, while Lazarus was one of those reclining at table with him. Mary took a liter of costly perfumed oil made from genuine aromatic nard, and anointed the feet of Jesus and dried them with her hair. The house was filled with the fragrance of the oil. Then Judas the Iscariot, one of his disciples, and the one who would betray him, said, "Why was this oil not sold for 300 days' wages and given to the poor?" He said this not because he cared about the poor, but because he was a thief and held the money bag and used to steal the contributions. So Jesus said, "Leave her alone. Let her keep this for the day of my burial. You always have the poor with you, but you do not always have me." The large crowd of the Jews found out that he was there and came not only because of him, but also to see Lazarus, whom he had raised from the dead. And the chief priests plotted to kill Lazarus too, because many of the Jews were turning away and believing in Jesus because of him. The Gospel of the Lord. So here we are in the final week of Jesus' life, and in this moment that we experience today in the Gospel, there's a moment of rest, there's some fresh air, there's a chance to breathe deeply, because everything has been set in order here. For the rest of this week, especially starting on Wednesday and Thursday, we're going to see a lot of disorder, and we're going to see the chaos of sin. But for this precious moment, this wonderful dinner at Bethany, amongst the friends, Martha, Mary, Lazarus, and all of their company there, for this brief moment, things are put in order. Martha, whom we meet first in the Gospel serving, but in a disordered way, is here serving again. And now she's serving in a perfectly ordered way. Lazarus, who was just days before this reclining in the tomb, who was laid low by death, is now reclining at table, delighting in the company of his dear friend. And Mary, remember whom we meet, first of all, at the feet of Jesus, is back there again. And the love that moved her to go to the feet of Jesus and listen to him early on has brought her to the feet of Jesus once again, and now she does this most extraordinary thing. If you think back to the way that the spiritual exercises of St. Ignatius begin, we can get an insight into the order that has been put in place in this gospel. In the very first meditation, this very famous meditation on the principle and foundation from the spiritual exercises, St. Ignatius proposes that we, the retreatants, pray on the end of human life. What is the end for which we are created? And the end for which we are created is to praise, to reverence, and to serve. That great trinity of its own, that trinity of human action, to praise, to reverence, and to serve. And here in these three friends of the Lord, in Lazarus, in Mary, and in Martha, we see that order of praise, reverence, and service put properly in place. How so? To praise is, first of all, to take delight in. It's a bit like what God does at the very beginning of creation. He saw this and declared that it was good. He saw that and declared that it was good. And at last he sees the pinnacle of his creation, the human person who will become his friend. And he says, very good, very good. The first step, the end for which we ourselves who are created in the image and likeness of God, the first thing that we are created for is to delight in God's goodness. And we see that, first of all, in Lazarus here, reclining at table with his dear friend whom he loves, delighting in his presence. We'll come back to Mary because she's the linchpin of the whole thing. Let's go to Martha. Martha serving. Praise, reverence, serve. Here we see Martha serving in the correct spirit. Has much changed about her service outwardly? No. She's still preparing food in the kitchen, perhaps. She's bringing it to the table. She's arranging all the things that need to be arranged in order to have a large number of people at your house and an honored guest. There's not much outwardly changing about her service, but the inward spirit of it has totally changed. And so we see the proper ordering of service there. But in between these two, in the core, in the middle of them, what provides the proper measure from delight to service is the measure of reverence. The word that St. Ignatius used for this in his native Spanish was acatamiento, which doesn't have a direct translation even into Latin, but the closest Latin could come to it was reverencia, from which we get reverence. It meant an awestruck love that has a very peculiar feature about it. It's a love that is marked by a kind of distance. I see my beloved not simply reduced to myself, but properly as the other, as the one who is there, whom I do not simply gobble up into myself. We see this come to absolute fruition in Mary in the fact that Mary always is associated with the feet of the Lord. She doesn't presume to go up to his eye level. She doesn't presume to anoint his head. She goes to his feet because she confesses in her awe of who she recognizes him to be. She confesses her great love for him. She's engaged in this most intimate of acts, but the intimacy is guaranteed by her lack of presumption, her insistence that she will go to his feet. She will lower herself so that she does not presume to be the one that elevates herself, and then it is God himself that can elevate her. We have a lot of trouble in our culture understanding reverence because for us, love is so much about breaking down barriers and get directly to the thing that we love or the person whom we love. We have great difficulty with reverence. It's the thing that maybe grates most against us when we try to pray on the principle and foundation in our own retreats these days. But distance is what guarantees the proper ordering of love. It allows the beloved to be different from me, and that is an absolute requirement for love to be real. Reverence is also the measure that sets the proper ordering for both praise and service. My delighting in the good things of the world and my delighting in the good things of God feed me into the posture of reverence. That's what they're leading to. It's the excellent midpoint. And out of that contemplation of reverence, out of my beholding of the beloved, then I can be fed properly into service. Then my service will be properly ordered. Mary's act of reverential love fills the entire house in the most material of ways, because that fragrance, the fragrance of what is applied to the feet of Jesus, extends out to all the people in the house and draws them into Mary's perfect act of love. Judas is also touched by this, but notice what happens when he himself is encountered by this, the fragrance of Mary's love. What happens when he himself is addressed by it? It enters into his lungs too. It moves him, but it moves him in the opposite direction. Because he does not find reverence in himself, what he experiences is nausea. And then notice what he does. He uses the veneer of service. He abuses the supposed advocacy for the poor in order to make his point, to seem so righteous. Why was this not sold and given to the poor? I'm a great advocate for the poor. Look at me. I'm all about justice. Baloney. If you do not have reverence, if you do not have love that allows a distance to be put between you and the beloved, if you do not have deep contemplation, if that is not where your service begins, you are not an advocate for the poor. You're an advocate for yourself. It's a good corrective to us because in our day, we so immediately go to service. We immediately go there. And there is something good about that. But we have to let reverence provide the measure. We have to begin in the state, in the posture of contemplation, in order to lead into a properly balanced action that will be real service and not just service of myself. One of the most famous taglines about the Society of Jesus, about the spirituality that came to the church through St. Ignatius, is finding God in all things, even in the beautiful fragrance of nard, which was used to anoint dead bodies, among other things. Even there we can find God. But that is not usually our starting point. We don't natively begin by finding God in all things. Our starting point is that we find ourselves in all things. And that's why St. Ignatius insists that we so need the first week of the spiritual exercises, in which I come to say, as Pope Francis famously said in his first interview as Pope, "Who is Jorge Mario Bergoglio? I am a sinner." I don't say it as a kind of literary genre. I don't say this as kind of just a turn of phrase. What I'm telling you, what I've experienced in the first week of the spiritual exercises is that I am a sinner. I, first of all, begin by finding myself in all things, how it can be useful to me, how it can be related to the projects that I have in mind. And I can so deceive myself, and I can dress it up in all kinds of language about service and everything else, and making the liturgy this way that it has to be. No, I have to begin with the truth of who I am, so that then I can find my beloved Lord in all things. How do I do that? I go to the feet. I go to the feet. That is the gift that the church is proposing to us on this day, the Monday of Holy Week. Let's go with Mary to the feet of Jesus. Because of her love, she can already see that those feet are going to be the ones that bear the nails for you and me out of an enormous act of love. Her love has taught her that. That's what we're being invited into today, is to let our love be expanded. Let's go to the feet. Let's learn reverential love. And then our delighting in the Lord. And then our service will be properly ordered. And then we will come to the end for which we are created. Amen.